right, so that's how the world welcomed 2025, a brand new year. Nigeria is going to be what? 20? Democracy will be 26 years. And then we can talk about
1999.
26 years by May.
May 29.
May 29. So, but our independence should be about 65 years. So we're getting older as a country. But we will look at 2025 with all the challenges that will accompany it. Let's see what we can envisage, as well as the opportunities, because they say besides every challenge, there's an opportunity. We've been joined in the program by some of our guests around our studios. In our Abuja studio, we have Jonathan Abakpa. He's an advocacy and policy influencing officer for Plan International, joining us from our Abuja studios. We also have Victor Tehembe, Executive Director of Raising New Voices, joining us from our Abuja studio as well as Hassan Gimber, legal practitioner working with CISLAC. Those are the gentlemen and all of the people that will be speaking to us. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you for having us.
So I will begin by the usual Happy New Year to all of you. That's Gimba who joins us via Zoom. Happy New Year to you as well. So let me begin with you, Jonathan, and I'm going to throw the question across board. So we'll take turns to respond. If you were to describe 2024, how would you describe 2024? And what do you see in terms of an overview coming into 2025?
Okay, an overview of what 2024 has been in terms of what it has been for the country. I would want to segment it into what it has meant for young people, what it has meant for the older generation, and then perhaps look at it at what it has been for the country overall. So, the elections were held in 2023, and for the very first time in the history of Nigeria, not for the very first time, but for a very long time, we've had a teeming young voters population that turned out for the election. There's no surprise anymore that after the election, quite a number of young people were disappointed. It was more like business as usual or business worse than usual happened again. And then the judiciary wasn't so fair to so many young people in their thinking. And then 2024 came, perhaps with less hope for so many young people, because, this is a country they've hoped upon and they've thought that 2023 will be a major decider and a game changer for them. But then what has happened in 2024 has been that we've witnessed more economic depreciation. Sometimes people may want to argue that the reformations that are happening are reformations that we would have to pay the dues at the very moment and then get the rip-off in years to come. But in my thinking is that for young people who form over 60% of the population in the country, and in a system where we have democracy running, that we do not have a system where very few persons decide and assume that they are speaking for over 60% of the population. So if over 60% of the population have said they want to go right, and more below 1% of that population said we are going right, going left, it shows that the voices of the people were properly not emancipated into the runnings and of the government for 2024. We had situations where there was high inflation rates, there was flotation of the naira was floating, the battle with the fuel subsidy removal and the clamor for the subsidy to be brought back. We've had situations where education tuitions grew higher and young people in their numbers were requesting that there should be a revert of such policies and decisions that were being made by government and educational authorities. And we've had situations where still, as the government is seeking reform, saying that there are economic reformations going on, that the unemployment rate is even still increasing. And in their numbers, you keep hearing young people jackpotting. The jackpot rate is still increasing. And then you still find that countries are becoming stringent with their immigration policies just because of the teeming Nigerian young population that is leaving the country. So what has this meant for us in 2024? It has meant that 2024, perhaps, we expected what we are seeing, but we did not expect that it was going to be this bad and this deep. What has it meant for the older population? It has meant that they need to sit up because we were looking up to them at the time. And they are the helm of affairs and they take majority of the decision. For our parents, to a large extent, these are your friends, these are your schoolmates. And so it has come to a time where I think that there should be that transgenerational conversation already happening. But we did not find that even happening within this year. As much as we found the president at different occasions trying to be a listening president, but it is different when you come to address the country. And it is different when you create a dialogue platform where you can actually genuinely hear from the young people. We did not find that happening
Jonathan, if I may comment
repeatedly.
If you can hear me, my apologies, so that we can get in the perspective of Victor and the rest of the people on the panel. Victor, do you share the sentiment of Jonathan, and what do you see in 2025?
Well, thank you very much. So, yes, I do share in the sentiment and the good analysis of my friend Jonathan here. And but to also add to it, it would be that 2024 has actually been a very tough year for young people, especially, in fact, not just young people, but Nigerians in general. And so because 2024 is a time where we had to deal with a whole lot of, inflation, hardship, what kind of difficulties here and there. And there was this air of despair, restlessness among young people because, just like he said, the 2023 election was looking like a year where young people were going to have their say in their teaming numbers, but then that didn't happen. And then with the situation of things on ground, really make people frustrated. And also, when you look at it, he also spoke about the reforms that that are happening. Generally, from my own perspective, I wouldn't really entirely fault all of these reforms. But of course, there are reforms that we say that are needed. But then, where a lot of people have issues, including myself, it is the manner and method in which they were implemented at the times that they were kind of being this kind of implemented. And so, based on these reforms, among everything, which I believe that in the course of the program we'll have to discuss about them, and then maybe I'll also share more information about this. But also because of the reforms that we've had, just like he said, unemployment rate has increased. Businesses are also leaving Nigeria because of this economic situation that we have. So at the end of the day, 2024 was not for the general populace, was not a good year. And but then people still have hope because at the end of the day, regardless of whoever is this president, people want a country that works for them, where they sow and they're able to also reap in that regard. And and then we also have to look at it that maybe since 1979 or thereabout, we're having a problem. We're having a president who is the most unpopular president in the history of Nigeria. So a whole lot of things are into it. But then going into 2025, we are hoping that from these reforms that have happened, and also looking at the fact that say, okay, we need to bear the brunt for a while before we begin to reap the benefit. We hope that from 2025, we begin to see this benefit manifest in the economic life of the people. We see that hope is being restored back to the people. People are having belief and faith back into the country, so that Japa will not be an escape route from this in poverty, but so that young people can live, achieve their aspiration, pursue their goals, and achieve their dreams, basically in a country called Nigeria.
So it seems as though the conversation is taking a life of its own, with reflections on the place of young people, particularly within the polity, particularly as it has to do with the need for them to be able to have an environment where they can achieve their aspirations. And, where that seems to be eluding them even now, the JAPA thing is what is featuring prominently. And now it's reminiscent of what the president promised in his Independence Day broadcast last year, which was a 30-day National Youth Summit, which we have not seen materialize 3 months down the line. And we're in a new year already. So, Mr. Hassan, now, let's talk more about the place of young people. Should young people continue to wait on, meaningful engagement from, politicians of the old guard in order to find expression? Where is the place of personal development for young people to achieve their aspiration, whether it be economically or even politically? Shouldn't young people be creating a table of their own?
Thank you so much for having me, first of all. I think if we go back to 2023, this stage was somehow set by the president on his first day in office, where he declared the removal of fuel subsidy. And as a result, it shows this is a government that doesn't engage people. And then if you look at the difference in terms of age between the young generation and then the old generation, there's a bit of misunderstanding. The young people are always seen as people that are moving too fast and the balance of how things are in Nigeria. But if you look at who we have leading us, these are people that have been in power some 40 years ago, some 50 years ago, and then there are still the same people that things are being run together with. So for young people, the opportunities are shrinking, and then they continue to shrink. In terms of 2024, we have seen how the civics space is getting smaller and smaller. Any small criticism of government is responded to with iron arms, especially in terms of state government. We have seen people get beaten for criticizing a governor in Kaduna. We have seen the same thing happen to a lady in Zamfara. And then we have seen minors arraigned in Abuja because of protesting against bad governance and then hunger. And then the young persons we look forward to mostly are disorganized. There is no any semblance of unity between the youth. So it's going to be very difficult for the youth to actually have a say until they are united and then they continue to engage the government meaningfully. And then things are not actually offered to young people. You have to stand up by yourself and then be involved in governance.
I take it to Mr. Temba also to answer the same question, reflecting on the place of young people, particularly as it has to do with personal development.
Yeah, so, so for young people, the place of young people exactly cannot be, kind of exaggerated, because, so the reason why, sometimes the reason why we even say that young people have to be included, young people need to take this initiative, is simply because young people most of the time come up with the most innovative ideas, with the most innovative solutions to some of the problems that we have. And just like Hassan said, he says sometimes the problem is, what people perceive as problem is that young people move too fast. But as a point is that you also, if you're also looking at the older generation, they also move too slow sometimes for our own liking, because at the end of the day, the young people have the energy, these young people have the vigor. And so to even say that, at least I can say that for this government, for instance, in terms of appointment of young people and all of those things, you could give them a credit on that. But however, as much as young people are there at the table, are they really representing the collective goals, the collective desires of young people across this cross-board in Okina, Nigeria? So for me, maybe just like you said, is it a time for now young people to start creating their own table, to start building their own table, to sit on it, and then trying to stop taking away from there? Maybe that's a whole different conversation that we might still get to have. But then the place of young people cannot have, because for you to drive, and for you to drive progress, for you to drive economy, you need the input, you need the activity, you need the activeness of the young people, because these are people that have the energy, people that have the strength to do the work. Even when you go to the labor market, you have more of young people there. When you go to people who are innovating solutions to some of our problems, it's also mostly young people. And so at this point, it is no longer again saying that we should be having a conversation of debating or maybe having a conversation about what is the place of the young people. In fact, the place of the young people cannot be emphasized. And it is not, most of the times when you want to address issues that concern young people, it's not to, there is this kind of dismissive way, they talk about young people, say, okay, so we are going to include young people here, but what kind of young people are you including? What kind of young people are you bringing on board? What is their pedigree? What is their own vision? Does it align with the collective vision or with the collective goals of the other young people in Nigeria that that they are going to represent? So usually it's I think now that it has to, in 2025, it now has to be more deliberate. So just like you also mentioned, we are going to have a national youth dialogue at the beginning of the year, and then we've not had that. And then how is that even supposed to be planned? We have not even understood the modalities. How are young people across the country are going to be? So all of those things were not explained. After all, it didn't even hold. So I don't think that is even an issue. But then the place of young people is actually very important. And this is necessary, especially in 2025. Engagement with young people across board must be intentional, must be deliberate to achieve specific objectives, to make sure that we achieve results as we move forward.
Let's take it to Jonathan. I'm wondering what the specific objective will be, Jonathan. So let me paint a picture for you. Under the Tinubu administration, we had a few young persons, but one is now out. Better I Do, for instance, now suspended. We don't know the status of the investigation concerning the allegations leveled against her. We also had Jamil, who was the Minister of Youth. She's left the cabinet, one of those sacked. I think the only young person there is the Minister of Youth, the current one. When I remember his name. I think Musawa, who is also the Minister of Arts, Culture, and Tourism. Not really young, but I think she's in her 40s or so, if I'm not mistaken. So the collective in terms of young people is not that much in the cabinet. I would like you to speak to that. The second part is there's a reality Nigerians have to brace up for. The president appears to have taken his position and posture that is not going back on his twin decision of removing fuel subsidy and the unification of the FX market. So that's the reality. So how should young people approach this policy to engage the political class and begin to effect change? How should young people perceive how the polity is being, the 2020, how should they perceive the polity in 2025, and how should they respond from the point of trying to effect change and also the point of trying to get involved in the polity?
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. So, first of all, to start with, we pride ourselves to be running democracy, and I was just listening before we came up that we'll be 26 years as a democracy. But then, what is democracy in its own self? It is about the people, and when you have 60% of a population of a people not well represented in the government, I mean, it begins to ask you the question if the people are actually the people who decide their fate in the government. And sometimes for me, I would want to just say that it is beyond having young people in the cabinet. It is having people who can actually represent the interest of the young people in the cabinet. So we can have better Idu. We could have had Dr. Jebila Biu. We could have had Olawande Wisdom in the cabinet. But does that translate into young people's interests being represented? We can have over 30 ministers, being people within their 40s, 30s, and even 20s, right? But when issues around education rights comes up, tuition fees, when issues around things like fuel subsidy comes up, and those people are not able to represent the views of the young people in the cabinet, then, I mean, the representation of young people is totally quashed. So the question we should be pushing forward is, how well are the voices of the young people gathered, garnered, and how well is the government even listening to the voices of the young people? Like I was saying before, I was cut short earlier on, we have not had yet that transgenerational or intergenerational platform where the young people can engage critically and meaningfully with the government. And when the president made that statement of the summit, we are looking at a summit that will not be a summit for elite young people. We are looking at a summit that will translate into people at the grassroots, people who speak in their native languages, people who push the trucks, people who engage on a daily basis running the informal sector. Those kind of people should be the people who should sit together with those who run the formal sector and then with the government to run and come up with resolutions. By the way, the National Youth Council on the National Council on Youth Development held in December, I think 12th, 13th and 14th of December. What were the resolutions that came from that council? And then how much was it a representation of what young people wanted from that council? So these are the issues that we should be looking at. And then, yes, how can young people begin to engage the policies? Young people have tried engaging the policies. You wouldn't forget that the End Bad Governance protest was a way that young people could air their grievance. And what happened? About 10 of them are still facing treason charges till date for protesting, for airing their views, to say we do not want a bougie state anymore. We want the government to cut down the expenses. You should return fuel subsidy. You should reduce tuition fee, or if possible, make education free. Those are the demands that were coming from the End Bad Governance protest that young people were being. So then, how legitimate can young people begin to engage the government? These are the conversations we should be having. The government needs to open its own mind and be broad-minded. I mean, this is a government that is coming from the Nadako struggle. And so it is a government that is supposed to have an open mind to engage young people. And so when protest happens most times, permit me to say it is because the young people have not found any legitimate means. They have tried other means, and the last means of engagement will be protest for us to go to the streets. I can bet you that if the National Assembly opens its doors for meaningful conversation, if the cabinet members can open their doors for meaningful conversations, we will not be having the level of protest we are having. And after the protest, we will not be having arrest. We will not be having young people go to Twitter to engage in a very wrong way. It is because the room for engagement is locked. But then, as young people, if the hunter has learned to shoot without missing, then we too, we must learn to fly without perching. And so we must begin to find other ways of organizing. And what are the other ways of organizing? One of it simply is that we need to get more political. We are all political beings. And so we need to start seeing how we can begin to infiltrate the political party system, because it is from the party systems that House of Rep members get their primary tickets. It is from the party system that governors get their primary ticket. It is still from there that the president gets his primary ticket. So by the time we begin to influence and infiltrate the big political parties, and if possible, begin to build alternative political parties. When I say alternative political parties, I'm not talking of the Labour Party kind of alternative, or the PDP kind of alternative, or the APC kind of alternative. I'm speaking credibly of an alternative that will be ideologically driven. And beyond engaging the political system, we must begin to build our capacity to engage. So when the table is created for us, what are the conversations we take there? So I was in a sitting in 2023, the democracy convening, and one of the rep members that came, the young people wanted to engage the rep member in terms of, this is your first time in the House of Reps and you are just coming in. We want to set agenda for you. But when he came, the first thing he stated was, how much do you need? Is it 1 million naira? And I'll give it. It was so striking that, yes, we had young people who felt it was condescending for such a conversation to happen in the public. But again, we had young people who started engaging and visiting his office, requesting for that 1 million. So when you have this level of conversation and then you sell yourself out, to a large extent, we lose the ball and then the court is open for them to continue to play their game. So we must begin to build our capacity so that when opportunities do come, we engage constructively and we hold our opinions more firmly. The last part of it is he has remained very firm. He's, to a large extent, he's a speaking president, but not a listening president. He would address us this morning, I'm quite certain. And in his address, he will tell us there's renewed hope. But then, the young people too must not keep short. All the legal means that are open to us to speak out, we will continue to speak out. We should use the X to speak out.
I'm happy about the direction, Mr. Bakwa. I'm happy about the direction that you're taking it to now. And I want to interrogate that yet again with reflections from the year 2024. If we look at some of the political challenges that Nigeria experienced in 2024, we see that young persons, featured prominently, and sometimes not in the best of records. When we look at, political crisis in some states like Rivers, we see that, some parts of the destruction that happened, it was with the use of political thugs, and some of which, formed the demography there were young persons. If we look at, the hashtag End Bad Governance protest that was supposed to happen in 2024, that eventually occurred, there was no unanimity in the approach of that protest. Yet again, we see that young persons did not come together, in one group. There were divisions, with a number of groups saying we're not a part of this protest. In fact, there were divisions within the NANS formations, with some saying that we're not a part of this protest. So if you're advocating that young persons, should, take on politics where there is no unanimity, are we not going to see a repeat of the same brand of politicians that we currently have, that do not have a clear ideology about how to proceed with development? Perhaps I should take it this time to Mr. Gimba. Mr. Gimba, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Oh, now we can hear you. Go ahead.
All right, thank you. I don't think there is anywhere in the world, even in established democracies, where the voice is one. I think the major aspect now of democracy is to have that dialogue, to be able to have conversations between different opinions, different ideas, and then even people with different kind of backgrounds and their understanding of the world and how government should be run. It is these discussions now that will make us understand the differences, and then we'll be able to pick which opinion or position is better in the running of the government or in the path that the youth should take. Now, the issue with ours now is it sometimes gets violent because people are out now protesting against bad governance, and then you are against that protest. I don't think it's wrong for you to come out then and protest against it. But once you pick a position, now you attack protesters, then that is completely something else. And then if you look at it, who should that blame go to now? Is it those youths attacking the other protesters? Or is it the hand now that is behind the screen controlling those youths that are attacking the protesters? Because poverty has been weaponized in this country to such an extent whereby a person that is fighting for your right is a person that you could see as your enemy at the right price. So it's actually about enabling now conversations between the youths. Let us be able to understand our differences and then the direction that we should take, but not silencing one opinion and then taking it as the best opinion, or just to have a unified opinion. That is never going to happen.
Okay, let's take it to Mr. Victor. Bukola has raised a very important narrative, and I want to build on it. And where I'm coming from is sometimes politicians come into power, they do all of these campaigns. And for instance, now, I remember I did a report when the president was at Chatham House to make a presentation before he became president as then candidate Bola Tinubu. And I remember some of his words. He said the electricity in Nigeria, the model is not good, is broken, and it will be fixed. Now they've done the Electricity Act 2023 so that it's decentralized, but we still have national grid collapses. Investments have not come in as much as possible. And when you ask the Honorable Minister for Power, the thing he will say is, we're doing our best, vandalism, sabotage, and all of that. My problem with that always is, as a politician, when you have a great plan, you should also plan for sabotage. It's part of the game, unfortunately. So I said that to bring to the fore, how do we mobilize young people with a critical mass? Just like your colleague has said, Mr. Gimba said, we can't get everybody to speak with one voice. So we're talking about the critical mass, the majority now. How do we mobilize majority of young people with a critical mass such that they have conviction and vision? Because they will be infiltrated, just like we saw with End Bad Governance.
Okay, thank you very much. So I would like to touch on the last question that was thrown to this Hassan Gimba, and then maybe through that I'll also flow into this question that you answered, because I believe that it all answers the same answer applies to all. Then, because the question asked to Gimba was about young people not speaking in one voice, and also citing examples from the End Bad Governance protests where you have some other youth group also speaking this differently. Now, the thing is, where I also have a problem sometimes is that when we try to talk about the youth like a monolithic group, like one kind of homogeneous group that is just one entity that was going around there and all of this. why voices might differ, at the end result, the overall aim of what young people want is all the same. I mean, even if because everybody wants a good country that works. And when you also look at the end bank governance protest, when you look at the fact that NANS also came out to denounce the protest and NYCN came out to denounce the protest, I mean, honestly, everybody knows that these are like government arms. These are like government agencies or maybe associations, basically. So very difficult when you find these people come out to speak against the government. So it was very fun. And one interesting fact was a day before the end bank governance protest was to start, a day or two, I was at the National Assembly, and I saw some people from the National Youth Council of Nigeria. And so my colleague that was with me, I told my colleague that by the time we get back home in the evening, you will see that NYSC will announce that they are not part of the protest. And that is exactly what happened. And so, just like Jonathan was saying, that we need to also build our capacity to engage. So as much as we are organizing, the government is also organizing. And you also rightly mentioning that definitely people are going to infiltrate. So where I said I have a problem with talking about the youth or thinking about the youth as a monolithic, homogeneous group, is that first, even though we are young people, we are also human beings. We are governed by our biases, we are governed by sentiment, we are governed by interests. And so what I always advocate is that can it then be a time where we begin to organize young people based on their interests, based on their different sentiments? And so, for instance, even though we all want a better country where things get better and all of those things, we have young people who belong to PDP, we have young people who belong to APC. And so we have young people who also belong to this Labour Party. And so maybe let me also say that is where the problem came, that young people who were on the side of this Labour Party expected that every young person in the country must vote in that direction, because they say, how can you be a young person and not vote? But again, what is it that if I have an interest, I'm like PDP or I'm in this kind of APC, and I want my government, or I want my party to win, to be in government, that is my interest. So why will I not say, as a collective, as young people, we must move towards this direction? But at the end goal, you want a better country. I also want a better country in my opinion. So can we organize that in this party that we are, which was what also Jonathan was basically talking about in terms of saying we need to engage with the political party systems as well. When you belong to this political party, can we pursue this particular development agenda within these parties that we belong to? So
yeah, Mr. Victor,
wherever you are, we are all achieving the same goal.
Yeah,
yes.
Just the time is not on our side, but your points are quite apt. I think we get the direction you're going, and this is important. And this conversation has to continue. I think where I like what you said is being in different political parties, but having some common goals, so that we don't get the worst of us to represent the best of us as much as possible. Victor Tehembe is the Executive Director of Raising New Voices. He's been joined in our Abuja studio by Jonathan Abakpa, Advocacy and Policy Influencing Officer, Plan International. Also, Hassan Gimba, legal practitioner who works with CISLAC, joined us via Zoom. Gentlemen, thank you so much, and we look forward to more engagement in the year 2025. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
All right, so we will switch gears now. Maybe we'll take a short break, but when we come back after the short break, we'll get back to where we started on the morning brief, the very first day, the very first edition. If you were not part of it, we'll give you some highlights of 2024. Join us again.